What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 6 of the Firefighters Podcast. Joining me this week is one of my good friends and one of my early mentors, retired FDY captain Mike Mccaffery. Mike, how you doing?
Good, very good. How you doing, Rob?
I'm all right. So I wanted to mix it up this week. The last 2 episodes were pretty intense, as I know you're into all that kind of stuff. So I want to mix it up a bit this week and bring in somebody who I met on my first day at Engine 216. The first person I met when I knocked on the door, you answered the door. I don't know if you remember that. You were sitting on the house watch.
I remember.
You made me stand there awkwardly while you drew me, which I still have hanging in my garage. This very poorly drawn picture of me, but
I think it was a pretty good drawing, actually.
well, history will say otherwise. When I track it down, I'll put it up for the viewers and let them vote. But Mike is not only the first person I met at Engine 216, but he's the first artist that I met on the fire department. Mike is an excellent painter. So as I said earlier, I want to mix in all the different types that it takes to make a firehouse, and Mike is certainly a different type. So let's start out in 216, man. You went there straight from the academy, right?
Yes. Back in 1997, I guess I got there.
97. And like most of my other guests, you started out with the police department, correct?
Yes, I did.
So you were part of that whole hiring freeze that Andy was part of, where they didn't hire firefighters for like 6 or 7 years or something crazy?
I don't know. I don't think I was a part of that, actually.
Well, if you got a 97, that's the same test.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't really recall the hiring freeze. I just remember counting the days to leave the police department to go to the FD.
Well, I was just gonna say you were probably busy fighting crime, and you didn't have
Yeah.
time to worry about fighting fires at that time.
Yeah.
All right. So, how did you like 216? I've wanted to ask you that because I have my own feelings. But I always felt like there were guys there, people like you, who made the place very enjoyable to work. How did you feel working there?
I loved it. It was a little far from home, but other
Right,
than that, I loved
exactly.
it. There were a lot of senior men there to learn from, and
Yeah.
great guys. I mean, it was a great place. When I got there, I was looking to play football for the fire department, and Danny Sir, who we both worked with, I worked with, he was the captain of the football team, so it was a good place for me to be.
Yeah, for your listeners, I didn't work with Danny Sir. He was the first firefighter killed on 9/11. I happened to be the first firefighter assigned to Engine 216 after 9/11. So I didn't work with Danny, but I always felt a sort of connection to him since I, was put in his roster spot and into his group, which wasn't common to put a probie in the chauffeur's group, but that's what our captain did. All right. And I guess my real question is, what did you like about me? Because you seem to take to me when not many other guys there really did. I was a probie and shaved head, looking little freak, and you right away you seemed to warm up to me. What was that about? You sensed something?
Well, yeah, you were weird. I could tell right away. I'd like you. No, when you got there, I was busting your chops a bit by telling you to stand still and draw you, and you did. And I thought that was cool. You accepted that pretty easily. And I remember us talking early on. I think one night we were hanging Christmas lights or something like that, and we got to talking about Walt Whitman and books and and different kinds of things. Like, the kind of conversation you didn't always have in the firehouse. They certainly exist, but you didn't always have it. So we had a connection kind of with that. We were both into sports. Um, it was easy to like you. For me, I think other guys didn't
For
like you
you.
too much. But no, for me, it was easy to like you. And we, right off the bat, we had fun conversations.
Yeah, I thought so too. So much that Mike invited me to live in the apartment in his house, which I did for several years. Some of the best times I think I've had were living in that tiny little apartment with my crazy roommates. Um, but one thing that you taught me, like, fairly from the beginning, was to call bullshit. Like, a lot of guys would tell you to keep your mouth shut. Um, you know, Especially when you're a probie, you're not really looked at to say much. But you always encouraged me to question things and speak my mind when I had to. Um, why? Well, I know why you told me that, but what made you feel that way? Like, did something specifically happen in the fire department to make you feel that way? Or
Um, no, not the fire department. I mean, possibly just from my 6 years experience on the police department. You saw a lot of things, and when something didn't look right, it usually wasn't right. So you at least had to question things, and I think you'd be crazy not to, especially in this crazy environment, this crazy world now.
yeah, yeah. I remember we had a covering boss, and I was detailed to the truck, and I was still a probie, and I had the can, and we were the fast truck. And I remember saying to him, we're staying. It was one of those, yearly we'd lose a whole block in Greenpoint fires, all the row frames. And I'm standing there, and I'm looking down, 5 or 6 houses down, and I see smoke pushing out of the roof. So I told the captain, like, Cap, there's smoke pushing out of that roof, 5 stories down. And he just looked at me. He told me to shut up. And then lo and behold, a half hour later, they give it a 1075 in that building. Um, so that, for me, that kind of cemented it. I was like, well, I'm not going to shut up if we're going to, if I'm right,
See a
you
fire
know,
going on.
right. Like,
But
is that
that's
what we're
something
supposed to do?
they teach in the fire academy, right? Like even if you are a probie and you see something, you're gonna say something. And if the guy tells you to shut up and it was nothing, then so be it. But if it was something, then then he looks good.
Right.
So no, without a doubt.
Well, he didn't get the spot. So I guess there's a there's a reason for that. Um, so also, so people out there know, Mike went down to Washington with me back in 2015. He was actually one of the people who fired me up to go. You're also the person who introduced me to Diane, who I had on a couple weeks ago, um, which is a whole nother cause that seems like we're getting into. So pack your
It's
bags.
another cause, but it's not all that different, right? It's the two things to me really seem to go hand in hand.
They do.
Firefighters trying to get acknowledgement over health effects from something and being ignored. Like in both situations, we were just being ignored.
Right. I mean, but with the 9/11 stuff, I feel like they weren't really ignoring us. It was more like it was like that guy telling me to shut up. It was more just, yeah, 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 yeah. The air. We lied about the air, but you'll be fine. Like, I don't know. I always felt like they acknowledged it, but also wouldn't take care of us at the same time. It was weird.
Well, they acknowledge it on 9/11, right? We used to
Right.
point out all the hypocritical politicians with their posts saying how much they love first responders and how much they love firefighters. And then when we're asking for a bill, to for our health, to take care of us, they did, a lot of them did ignore it, voted against it plenty of times. So many politicians that are still running around today voted against it. and people forget about that. And these same guys, they still, or ladies, they still post all these things on 9/11. You know, well, love the first responders when we know
Right.
they're full of baloney.
Well, you see, I have trouble with the bills in the past. Like in 2019, that was an up and down bill. It wasn't attached to anything. There was no pork. It was, Mitch McConnell wasn't trying to sell oil. It was just us, and that was it. So the people who voted no on that, they can go scratch. They as far as I'm concerned, they can't say never forget ever again. Rand Paul, Mike Lee, the usual
Yeah,
players. But in those past bills, I feel like they made it murky because they attached it to
oh yeah,
the omnibus bill, and they made it, so that they gave all the people who voted no an out because they could say, well, I wasn't voting no on that. I just didn't want to do whatever this other bullshit was. So I feel
yeah.
like in 2019, we really found out who the real, the people were who were against us. And it was no surprise that it was Rand Paul and Mike Lee, but here we are. Gets me fired up, man. I don't know. I know it gets you fired up.
Sure.
So
It's
a
hard
big
not to get fired up over. I mean, we've had a million discussions about this, and now it seems like the same thing is going on with the bunker gear.
right. It feels like money always wins when it comes to firefighter safety, right? It's always, I mean, money usually wins in every aspect in life, but for some reason they just see and I think I said this last week, like I think they do it because they know they can get away with it because firefighters, I mean, most firefighters in this country do it for free, right? They're volunteers.
Yeah,
So they know that these are the type of people who want to go into burning buildings and they want to go out and help people. So they're going to strap on the gear and they're going to go do it, and regardless of the danger it poses to them. So they know that, and they use that, to their advantage. And they also know that they can turn us against each other, which I think is something Diane has faced. It's very easy to paint someone out to be, you see it in every firehouse. One person doesn't like someone, and next thing you know, we don't like that person. So it gets very it's very easy for them to control the narrative, I feel like.
sure,
Um,
sure.
especially since, you know, more more of us aren't questioning it or speaking out.
Well,
People.
a lot of people don't even know about it. I mean, I go back to the firehouse and I talk about it all the time, and guys give me a look like it's the first time they've ever heard it before. And it's not being discussed in a lot of firehouses, and it really should be.
No, and neither was 9/11 illnesses
No,
either.
no.
I remember in 2015 we had a press conference and I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a lieutenant at the time who got on after 9/11, but he had like 13 or 14 years or whatever he had. And he said, "What is this press conference for?" And I told him, I was like, for all the guys getting sick from 9/11. He's like, "Who's getting sick? What do you mean? I'm sure there's like 5 or 6 guys in your firehouse right now. There's hundreds have died. Like nobody was even talking about it. That's why nobody was showing up. And I think there's a reason that nobody talks about it because that information needs to come from the top. They have no problem telling us, sending down, the unions will send down all these pamphlets and info for barbecues and all this other stuff. But the important stuff is, hey, take your bunker pants off because they might be giving you testicular cancer or, like, so I don't know. I don't know why the guys, I think partially is what you're saying is that they just don't talk about it. But I also think there's a reason that people aren't giving them the information to talk about.
Oh, without a doubt. I think that that information wasn't going around. It wasn't coming down from, like you said, from the administrative part of the job. It wasn't coming down from the unions, and if it was really in like small portions and
Right,
no urgency behind it.
right.
Um,
That's a
yeah,
good
yeah,
word to
sure.
use.
You wonder why that is, right?
Right,
It seemed like it always, to me, it always seemed a pretty important topic. That first, that we were lied to, right? They told us that the air was okay. Um, we worked, we did our thing. Guys were getting sick. We realized how bad the air was down there, and that really should have come out in a full force, and it just didn't. And guys talked about it, but it just kind of went away a lot of times. And it
No,
really it took people like you and Ray Pfeiffer and a whole bunch of others to really get the ball rolling on it.
I remember distinctly having arguments with people that I thought were my friends at the time. You know, that they were like angry at me for calling the city out. Like basically like I was complaining at the city. I'm like, you don't see the connection between how they're treating us in contract negotiations after 9/11. Remember that contract negotiation was filthy. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
they firefighters were on a pedestal after 9/11. We all know that, especially in New York. And we all, what people don't know is I think that day we had, it was like 3 or 4 years that we had still not had a contract on 9/11. So um when we were going for that contract, they did everything they can to make us look bad. And that's when, you know, I could say this because I have firsthand knowledge of it. Police officers were being offered vacation days to lock up firefighters, which never made sense to me because we negotiate the same contract. How could they not see what's going on? But also, this is something I've touched on, and the big reason why you're here is they instituted the zero tolerance policy. And in my mind, that is the biggest disservice. That I think that's a bigger disservice than the lie about the air quality, because you and I both know that we were going down there anyway, right? You weren't stopping firemen from getting down to ground zero to look for their
right.
friends. Not going to happen. So, you know, could we have slowed down the, you know, gotten us proper gear, slowed down, you know, the mad rush to get down there, pulled back once it became a recovery? Sure, we could do all that, but we were going there anyway. But I think the biggest disservice is when Bloomberg came in and started firing all the guys that were dealing with the emotional trauma. Um, you know, the studies that came out of Oklahoma City said you're going to see an uptick in drug use, you're going to see an uptick in divorce rates, drinking. You're going to have emotional problems. And so what does the FDNY do? They just start firing guys, you know, guys with 20, 30 years on the job who lost 30 of their best friends in one day, are getting fired for smoking a joint on the first day of their vacation. You know, up to the guys who had, you know, hard drug problems, you know, which, you know, I think there's a distinct difference between smoking a joint and shooting heroin, but the cause is pretty much the same, you know?
Well, the zero tolerance, right? That's when they started the random drug testing, right? I think in
Right.
2004,
Yeah,
somewhere around there.
somewhere around there, yeah.
Um, yeah,
But
I
that's
mean,
the
we were,
exact time when they said we were gonna start seeing those issues.
yeah, no, without a doubt that that was something I guess it came from Bloomberg, but it something that didn't really fit the situation, right? I think it basically got spurred on by a fight happened at a firehouse, right? A couple of guys were drinking,
Right.
and and then they said, okay, let's test everybody for pot randomly because these two guys were drinking, right? Which of course they deserve to get in trouble or whatever. Um, but then for them to say, okay, now we're going to do random testing, and if you come up for smoking a joint, we're going to fire you, right? That to me always seemed ridiculous.
Right, like, my issue isn't with the random drug testing itself, it's the reaction to the failed drug tests.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Um, and you know, the more I think about it, the zero tolerance policy also coincided with the "Holes the Drug" fight in the beginning, when James himself was fighting with Bloomberg and the city to get his cancer treatments paid for and his pain meds paid for. So I think there may be a connection there that they basically were trying to wash their hands of the situation and say, you know, all right, you got a problem, you do drugs, now we got causation to fire you or whatever. And they kind of lumped him himself in as a drug addict. Well, not
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of.
yeah.
He called him a drug addict. So I think that that's the angle that they were trying to go to wash themselves of um, the financial situation that they created by telling us the air was safe to breathe. You know, it wasn't Bloomberg, it was Giuliani administration and and the Bush administration. But you're still the boss, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yep.
Eh, did you ever I know your father was a firefighter who passed away from cancer. Did you ever think that it was possibly because of his gear or
Well,
would
no, he never
no?
wore funky gear,
Old
and he
timer?
smoked 2 packs of cigarettes for 20 years or however long. I
Right,
mean, no, they're certainly not
right.
connected.
Right, well, and it's important to point that out to people, like, we understand that people die of cancer, right? But the situation that we're seeing is you have non-smokers, who aren't seeing much fire duty, um, getting cancer or dying from cancers, that they probably weren't genetically inclined to get, and the trait that links all these people is the gear that they wear, right? With all these chemicals in it. It makes sense to me. Um,
Yeah.
but it is important to point out that, we still lose people, the old-fashioned way,
Yeah, sure.
you know?
Well, I remember when this was first starting coming out, we in New York, we go to a decent amount of fires. So you take in a decent amount of smoke. So you can understand that guys will get sick and get cancer at some point down the road. But like you said, there were plenty of firefighters all over the country, and I'm sure all over the world, that are wearing this gear, not going to a lot of fires, and they're getting sick, right, at high numbers. And it's got to be something. I think it's convenient for them to say, "Oh, well, it's because of the fires." Um, but if you're not going to a lot of fires and you're wearing this gear every day, it's gonna that could definitely
Exactly.
be the culprit.
And I don't know if you saw, I tweeted out, a report from the CDC from 2016 the other day, and in that report, they found that the numbers of firefighter cancer were going up, and their claim was that it was probably from, burning asbestos while fighting fires, and I'm sitting there thinking, "Really?" Uh, First of all, I mean, if you're at an active fire, most of the time, you got have a mask on, right? But how much asbestos is really out there? I mean, I know you and I, we took a big hit of asbestos on 9/11, but is there really that much that it would be causing cancers and all these firefighters around the country that really don't even see fire duty? Like, come on, that can't be what you're going with. It just
No,
doesn't
that's
add up.
why it's convenient for them to say it's asbestos, or it's smoke, or whatever.
Right.
They don't want to. At least certain people don't want to say that it's the gear causing that, because there's a lot of money behind the gear, right? These contracts, so they don't want to lose these big contracts, and they probably don't want to make a new product that doesn't have all these cancer causing agents.
Right, because that's gonna cause money in research, development, testing, you know? I mean, you could understand the reasons why, but none of them seem good enough to me when it comes to our health, um, especially the health of people who are risking themselves for other people. Like, you shouldn't
Sure.
we should be the last people that get screwed over by the government, but it just always seems to be like, I'm gonna keep coming back to it. It's because we accept it and we allow it. People treat you the way you allow them to, and I don't know what goes on in these union meetings, especially with the IAFF, who has new leadership now. He seems to be all over this, so that's good. But in
That
the
is.
past, I mean, how much are the lives of your brothers and sisters worth? Is it worth a steak dinner or whatever? I can't understand that level of thinking. Maybe it's because they wore a suit for too long and got detached from the firehouse. Uh,
That could certainly be it. Sure.
and I don't know. I think there's something that goes on in Washington that changes people, not for the better. But I want to get more into the mental health aspect. It's something, I don't know how much you want to talk about, but I know it's something that you've struggled with. You lost your best friend on 9/11, um, which I watched, uh, how you dealt with that. Um, and I know you've seen your share of messed up stuff along the way. Okay, but you made it, right? You made it to your retirement. You did your 30 something years and you got yourself through it. Um, which I think is something you should be proud of. Like I saw, you know, the dark turns you took at times, but you always seem to get yourself out of it. Can you share with people, because there are young firefighters listening, um, how you got yourself out of it? Like how did you persevere? Especially when I explained the lack of help that we had at the time, especially in '04, '05.
Um, you know, you do whatever you can, I guess, right? We were all dealing with things back then, and it was tough. You were either going to work in the firehouse, or you were going down to ground zero to dig, or you were going to a funeral. And in between, you were probably drinking with your friends to deal with all the stuff that was going on. I didn't have a family at the time, so it was easy to go to a funeral, and then after the funeral, you went drinking. And then, that builds up over time. Um, that's I don't know. I don't know how I got through it. Somehow I got through it.
Was it
Um,
talking to people or maybe your art, your painting?
yeah, somewhat. I guess that's definitely an outlet. But a lot of it was talking. You were talking to your friends. I mean, I was in an interesting situation where all my friends, from grade school through high school, we all joined the police department together. Then we all joined the fire department together.
Yeah.
So I had a crew of like 10 to 15 people or more who were all dealing with the same thing. Um, so yeah, it was drinking, artwork, a little going to concerts, whatever it was. You did what you could to get through.
Right. But you certainly didn't ignore it, which I think a lot of people we worked with at least tried to ignore it or act like there wasn't
Um,
anything wrong.
well, what were we?
Well, I'm just saying
Ignoring?
you did talk about it. I mean, I remember we had many
Yeah,
conversations
we
about it.
talked about everything we did revolved around 9/11 pretty much, right?
Right.
For years. So until you had other things to complain about.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's always something, yeah, neither of us went to war, right? At least I don't think you went to war.
No.
Neither of us went to war, but being a firefighter is kind of like you have these little doses of it. It's like you don't go away for a year to 3 years, to a foreign country, but you go away for 24 hours and you deal with all this intense stuff. And then you come home to your family and you got to act like everything's normal, even though you're not getting fired at or whatever. But I think on a small scope, it's kind of similar.
Well, if you just at the World Trade Center, right at the ground zero, um, it wasn't war, but that was an act of war. And
Sure.
we were certainly on a battlefield, and we were digging through that rubble and finding things you didn't want to find.
Yeah.
Um, and then sure, yeah, you went home, and how do you just brush that off? And the way we did it in a very unhealthy way was to drink. Um, you know, of course, over the years, you find healthier ways to deal with it, right? Whether it
Right.
be through artwork or music or exercise, right? I ran a marathon somewhere along the way in there that took my mind off it for a little bit. Um, so, yeah, I mean, for young people today, right? Young firefighters today, they are seeing bad things. Um, when COVID first hit New York, that was tough, especially the EMTs and paramedics. Those those poor people, they get paid a lot less than firefighters do, a lot less than cops do, and they do as much work and face as much danger as any of us. And
Yep.
and those poor guys, how do they deal with that, right? And I'm sure a lot of it is drinking, drugs, and hopefully there's some healthy ways to get out of that also.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that needs to be addressed is the suicide rates in EMS, they're pretty high, because I I was an EMT, but I never really worked EMS, but I always felt like it was looked down on if you talked about having bad thoughts about a bad run, I guess like you were expected to suck it up as Fun and
Well, yeah,
famously said.
it's just a thing. You're supposed to be a tough guy, right? You're a firefighter, you're a cop, EMT, whatever it is. You're supposed to be a tough guy. You're not supposed to talk about, wow, I just saw some really bad stuff. How do I process that? I mean, maybe you have a buddy who'll be like, who'll say, yeah, that really stinks. Let's go get a drink, right? And we'll forget about it. I mean,
Always, right.
that's how that works. And the problem does go unaddressed. When I was a police officer, I worked with several people that took their lives, and it was afterwards you would say, wow, I didn't see that coming. It's because like you said, it's not really, I don't know if it's frowned upon. I think especially today they'll at least point you in the right direction to get help. um, but it's not really addressed, I don't think, or it's just not, it's one of those problems they just hope goes away. I think they've made progress over the years, but like you said, I think they have a problem right now in EMS, right? I don't know the exact numbers or anything, but it's
Yeah,
it's a
I
bad
mean,
thing.
not to mention the retention rates, the people who leave, go to fire or
Well, they
some other
gotta pay
career
them.
because
I mean,
right.
how they don't get paid, I don't understand that. I worked with those, I worked alongside them for almost 30 years, and I was always amazed at what they would do with patients and how they would,
Mhm.
that the professionalism and the passion, and how do they stay if they're not being paid enough to live in the city that they work in? I don't.
No, I think I don't know if it's a representation issue because they're in like labor unions, right? They're not in uniformed unions like we are, um, which I think would help if they were somehow connected with our union. Um, but again, I think this is something that is tolerated, so it just keeps going. I know, every once in a while, especially at election time, you'll hear a politician talk about EMS pay, but nothing really gets done about it. Like now I hear talks about trying to create a new department for EMS, and it's like, well, how is that easier than just paying them and giving them their uniform status and give them equal pay? Like what? How is that? How is it easier to start over than to just say, okay, here you go. We're sorry that we've underpaid you for the last
Yeah.
25 years. Now let's get you back on the same scale. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Another thing that gets me fired up. Because it would seem like the money that it would take to create those new departments could be used to actually just give them a raise. Um, and also take care of the ones who are battling 9/11 illnesses and running out of sick leave and getting forced off the job because the city doesn't want to give them any more sick leave. So they're forcing them out on regular disability, which is like, I don't know, like $10,000 to $13,000 a year. Um, who's living on that in New York City with a family? Um, Besides the fact that these are illnesses that they got in the line of duty serving the city under the pretense that the air was safe to breathe, which is even more ridiculous. So yeah, EMS gets they it's unfortunate and I hope somebody really does fix it, but it's not right.
But like you said, I think it takes, it's up to us, right? It's up
Yeah,
to, um, the politicians weren't coming by after 9/11 and saying, you know what, these guys are getting sick. Let's make sure they're taken care of. We had to complain about it. We had to point out what was happening,
right.
for anything to happen there. Same thing with the bunker gear, right? No one is saying, hey, are we sure this bunker gear is good for the members? No, it had to be people pointing out, like, all right, we're getting sick. Why are we getting sick? EMTs, like they're talking about it. They're saying we're not getting paid enough. They're ignoring some of these guys who are getting sick with 9/11 issues. They have to step up. We have to step up, right? And it really is. It's the in unity there is strength, right? You have to. It has to be all of us getting together. I've always said EMTs should be marching, right? They should be protesting.
Mhm.
They should be making noise, and then they should have firefighters backing them up. They should
Yep.
have cops backing them up. They should have sanitation backing them up. Everybody should be in on this to help take care of our brothers and sisters in EMS.
Yeah,
It's something
but
that needs to be done.
like we said earlier, they try to create division amongst us for that reason, for negotiations. Let's turn police and fire against each other because that's always worked in the past, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, things you know about firsthand. Um, so I think that's what they do. I think that's and they turn they turn us against them against us, and then there's no unity. And so when they have their marches, they're like, "Ah, well, we're not gonna go help," when everyone should be there. It shouldn't be,
Yeah, sure.
you're right. Um, I don't know how we fix that, but, besides yelling. Um, I just if you're a firefighter out there, their fight is your fight. That would be my advice. We really it's a cliche, but we really are all in this together, where we should be. As we saw with COVID, right? I mean, nobody had the proper PPE in New York City, right? There were no masks, uh, gloves, everything. They were short on everything. Eyewear, um, which I think is why you're seeing the hesitancy from the members now with the vaccine and all that, because in the beginning, if it was such a big deal, why were we getting one mask to wear for an entire tour? So I get it.
Yeah.
You treated us like we didn't matter then, and now I don't know. I get it.
Oh, I get it. I get, any distrust or skepticism towards the government. I get it all. I do. Right. Like people don't want a vaccine. Who trusts the pharmaceutical companies? Who
Right.
trusts the government? The same government that can lie to the firefighters about the air quality at Ground Zero. They're capable of lying about a lot of things.
Right.
They lie about
Right.
weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. These people could lie about anything as long as it makes you know them look okay, or sell their agenda, or sell their promote their campaign, whatever it is. These people are capable of lying about everything, and all of them. There's
Exactly, and I think they in the beginning of COVID, they did a horrible job with contradicting themselves and the constant, you know, conflicting information, and, you can't blame people for being skeptical. You know,
no.
y I personally, I'm vaccinated, I don't look at it that way. I'm just trying to protect myself the best way I can, but I get why people are skeptical of it. I mean,
Oh, I get it. Sure, sure. No, I'm vaccinated, but I've always been wary of vaccines, right? When I had children, I read up everything I could about vaccines, right? There's always been this anti-vaxxer movement going on, at least for the last 20 years or so. Um,
did you come
so
across any of
I
your friends with swollen testicles or no?
what's that?
Did you come across any friends with swollen testicles or no?
No, no,
Oh, all right, good.
I haven't. But I was convinced by a doctor to have your children vaccinated. All right, okay, all right, everything went okay. Um, as COVID happens, they come out with a vaccine, and I'm skeptical, right? I, I wanted them to, I wanted to see, I wanted to wait a while to
Right.
see how things went. Let them test it out on the cops or something, um, and then I'll
He's
see how
kidding. He's kidding. He's kidding. Go on.
it. um, no, but so I was hesitant, and then a friend of mine on the job, he convinced me. I do have a certain amount of trust in the FDNY doctors.
Right.
I always felt that when you went down to the medical office with some kind of injury, they were looking out for your health, right? They weren't going to send you back to the firehouse if you were sick, and they were going to give you the best advice on how to get better. So that's where I said, if the fire department doctors are telling all the guys to get this vaccine, then I'm going to trust it.
Right.
Knock on wood, everything was fine for me. But I do understand not wanting to get it. I certainly understand that, and I feel it's only because of my trust of FDNY doctors in particular why I did get the vaccine when I did.
Mhm.
But now when they come down with some kind of mandate, where you have to get it, I don't like the government telling me I have to do anything. I really don't. Unless it's a firefighter knocking on my door saying your house is on fire, get out of the house. Um, I don't want to hear anything from the government on what to do that you have to do.
Right.
It's, I'm
Right. Well, I mean, we because they've given us many many instances where they've proven that they don't care about our health. um, so
well, well, the politicians don't. They
right.
really don't, right? They just
No.
they like using us as a prop. They like using the military as a prop,
Right.
um, whatever it is. But when it comes down to it, they certainly don't care about our health. But I think an FDNY doctor actually does.
Right. I agree. Um, I didn't need as much convincing as you. I'm willing to be the guinea pig, so to speak. So I got it right away. Also, I just wanted to get out of
Well,
my basement. But I have to say, um, yeah, I've never said this publicly, but I had COVID before, at the very beginning, and I got breakthrough COVID um, very recently, right around the time I started this show. You'll probably see it in a couple episodes, but I have to say it was way worse the first time I had it. And so, did the vaccine prevent me from getting it? Obviously not. But I didn't feel anywhere near the way I felt, last year. So, you know, that's my experience. I'm glad that I didn't end up in the hospital, and I, I don't know if I would have, but I was, I actually ended up in. It's weird when you look back. Like I ended up going to the hospital, but not staying there. They didn't know what COVID was at the time. I was just having these weird issues, and I went to a hospital and ended up going home. But so anyway, it worked for me. Um, you know, that's all we can do, right?
yeah,
Is,
no,
is,
no, it's worked for me too. Me and my family, and we're healthy, and I mean, do I give credit to the vaccine for doing that? I don't know.
yeah,
Hopefully it's helping. I really do. Um,
right. That's the
Hopefully
way
it's
I look
helping
at it.
more than it's hurting.
I think about the doctors and the scientists actually doing this work, and I have to believe that people spending their whole lives to do this, they've been working on this vaccine for longer than a year. I mean, they've been working on the coronavirus vaccine for over a decade. Um, not this strain or whatever, but I have to believe their heart's in the right place. If we can't believe in that, then there's not much left we could believe in, you know?
Well, the thing is, right, we're firefighters, right? I wasn't much of a student. I'm certainly not a scientist or a doctor, so we have to trust people, right, for
Right.
certain things, right? So when we're working down at Ground Zero, 2001, um, we had to trust people telling us what was going on, but they lied to us. So obviously that trust was, you know, was broken in that situation. We wear bunker gear to go into burning buildings. You know, we trust that they're giving us gear that isn't going to make us sick. Um, and they lied about that, right? Or they're lying about it now.
Well,
I think they,
it's a lie by omission at this point.
yes, yes. So you do have to trust somebody somewhere along the way, right?
Right.
And that's why I fall back to the fire department doctors. If they're saying, um, you know, how to treat a certain illness, that's how you treat it. If they're telling
Right.
you to get a vaccine that'll help out, I trusted them, and I still
And
trust.
they were sounding the alarm in 2001, you know, so they,
Yes,
to your
yes,
point, were all over the 9/11 illnesses.
yeah,
Yeah, Dr. Kelly and Dr. Braz, that's why they started our World Trade Center Health Program is the basis for the national program, you know, from all the things they've learned over the years, the phone company fire and all that
yeah.
happy stuff. Um, which is worth, if you're a firefighter out there, read up on the New York Telephone Company fire. I think it was 75, somewhere in the 70s. Um, you're seeing something similar to 9/11, you know, where I think a majority, if not most, of the firefighters who responded ended up dying from cancer, from the PCBs. So for you firefighters out there, that is a good one to read up on. Also stresses the importance of, oh, there's your kitty, of wearing your mask, um, as Jim and I got into last week. So
Yeah, wear your mask. It always makes me laugh with the, you know, these days, right? People say wear your mask, or there's people complaining saying don't wear your mask. And it sounds like the fire department when I first got on in the 90s. You know, there was still older guys that would, I remember an old timer telling me, like, kid, you can wear your mask if you want to. He's like, you know, if you feel you have to, but when you're with me, you don't have to wear it. And it just, so I listened to him, you know, and I tried to be a tough guy. All right, I'll try, you know, be able to deal with this smoke as much smoke as I could. Um, but obviously that was bad advice, right?
right.
Um, so
And that's exactly
and
what I
I
said to Jim
saw,
last week. That's
yeah,
what needs to
yeah.
change is that type of advice. Sorry.
And the good news is I think it is changing a little bit.
Yeah.
Before I retired, all the young guys, they were pretty pretty good wearing their masks all the time. You know, obviously you're taking it off probably a little sooner than you should at times,
Mhm.
but these guys were good, and I and I was still a dummy even in my last couple of years where I felt like I needed to see, so I would take it off or whatever it would be. Um, but I think the younger guys are getting better at something like that. So um, yeah, it is
Okay.
important though.
That that makes me think, like, brings me to my next question. Um, I asked my brother, he kind of skirted the question, but is there a huge difference in going to fires when you're an officer as opposed to being a firefighter? Like, did you, you know, which did you like better? Was it, you know, was it harder being in charge?
Um, no, I loved it. You know, I love being a firefighter also. Um, but I did like being an officer, right? Because you know, you weren't, you can get off the line a little bit if you're, you know, moving in with the line, you could do a little bit of a search.
Mhm.
I, yeah, I liked it. I don't think that it was easier physically because you
Sure.
weren't, you know, humping a hose or you weren't, you know, carrying a whole bunch of tools. Um, Yeah, no, what was the question?
You got it. Did you miss it? Like, I mean, we both know there's nothing better than putting the fire out. You had to miss that a little bit, no? Or
Yeah.
did you try to, shut somebody's air off once in a while and grab the line? What are those guys?
I got it a few times.
Oh
I didn't
yeah?
have to cut off anybody's air, but the guys let me use it every once in a while. Yeah, you missed that part of it, sure. But
All right. I always wondered that because I could see it. I had my 20th reunion last week, and you could totally tell the guys who became officers and the guys who didn't. They kind of. I don't know. My brother put it this way when he first got promoted. He said, "What used to be funny isn't so funny anymore." And that's
yeah,
kind of the
well,
feeling
yeah.
I got from these guys. Like, yeah, it's a little
Well,
more
you
serious.
get old and cranky, right? When you're a
Well, that
firefighter,
too.
you could stay up in the firehouse and make some noise or play some games or whatever you would do. And as I got older, I got cranky. I'd open the door and say, "Keep it down out there," or something like that. Yeah, it's a change, sure.
All right. Well, let's go back to 216 for a second because we didn't really talk about it much. Um, we had Bill Whalen, right? Legend. Um, he also had a very tragic story, which played out in the firehouse, right? Which had to be weird. I caught the end of Bill's career, so I got a much lighter Bill Whalen. But yeah, I won't tell his story, but he had a very dark family tragedy. But he was a great senior man, I thought. He really took care of me. Um, we had Warren, right? Who else did you look up to there?
Uh, I mean, Danny Sir,
Dan,
it
yeah,
was Kenny Collins, it was Mike Higgins, there were a whole
I
bunch
forgot
of
about
guys.
Mike Higgins. Yeah,
It was an interesting firehouse in that they were really senior guys, right, with almost 30 years on, like Bill Whalen and Warren Ward. And then you had 20-year guys, and then you had 15-year guys, and then you had guys like Danny Sir, what, around 12 years, I think, when I got there. Um, and you had guys with 5 years. So you just had all these different amounts of fire experience to learn from,
yeah,
and you had the 30-year Bill Whalen as into the job as as the young fireman. It was I always felt really lucky to be able to go to a firehouse like that and learn from people. It was a
for
great
sure.
experience.
I that was one of the most senior firehouses I can remember. Certainly when I first got there, right? I I mean, not time wise, but age wise, when I got assigned to 216, the closest guy to me in age was 15 years older than me, Ducey. Um, so that was a little weird, yeah, I don't know how much older than you are to me, but he was the next guy up for me, um, which I thought was weird. He also drove members of 216 to school in the school bus at one point, but that's another story. But yeah, and I think that's another thing that 9/11 took from us, right? Not just the members that were killed, but just naturally all the retirements and all those years of hiring made the job a lot younger. So I think maybe 10 years from now, you're going to see the same thing happen again, but right now it seems to be like a bit of a gap, right? I don't know.
Um, yeah, but the job has always dealt with that. You would have years of. I remember for a while, the job didn't hire for a whole bunch of years, right? And no, actually, it went crazy hiring, right? So we were getting. I remember my firehouse had like 10 guys with under 2 years on the job, um, and it would worry me sometimes during that time. But then 5 years later, they didn't hire for a while, and then we had a whole bunch of guys with a little time on. So where I thought it was good for the job. I think you're always going to get those kinds of things. I have to take a phone call. Could I could I pause this for a
It's all right.
second?
Nah, that's all right, man. I'll let you go. We've been on for a while. But thank
Bye.
you. Go answer your phone call. This is a first in firefighter podcast history. I got bumped, but thank you, Mike. Thanks for teaching me to speak out. And you're going to be speaking out with me again coming up soon. So pack your bags. All right. Be well. Keep
Sounds
enjoying your
good. I'm with
retirement.
you.
All right.
Thanks
Say
for
goodbye to
having
your
me,
cat. Say goodbye to the cat for me.
Rob. All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.